There's blood in the sky and it's falling on me. Feel it cascading as it washes me clean. The blood of many will be spilled by my hand. You will believe me when it covers the land. I don't feel much because...
So the mass shooting that happened this week, and that's, you were saying before that it's usually the middle-aged to older middle-aged white guy that commits these murders, but there's been new ones now where they're younger people doing it, like 28, 30-something-year-old guys who like have to beat off all the time because they don't know how to talk to women.
The incels.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we're back for another episode of Cities of Blood podcast, and once again we are joined by Sacramento author David Kulczyk. And today we're going to talk about mass shootings. I think we would be remiss if we didn't, considering the recent rash of them. I understand the Thousand Oaks shooting, which just happened, was number 307 for this year in the United States alone. So,
and what day are we on in this year?
And as of shooting this day, I don't know. As of that happened, I think we were only on day 312 of the year. So, like as you're talking about it, that's almost a mass shooting a day in the United States. So we're getting kind of numb to it in a way, which is terrible, and it's happening so more and more. I mean, I don't know how to verbalize this. What do you guys?
It's getting out of hand.
It's been out of hand.
Yeah,
the fact that we will, that we're not addressing, the main issue, which I guess is gun control, but at the same time, also the people who are committing the crimes, like Dave, you were just saying about them in the past had been, some middle-aged males predominantly. But I mean, we had a few years ago, we had that mass shooting that was a Muslim couple too, right?
Yeah, that was an oddball one.
That was an oddball one.
That was.
And then we also had a mass shooting. It is a mass shooting, the one that killed those police officers, which was a black veteran who killed those police officers because of what he perceived as all the violence in the shootings of black men out there.
A lot of these guys are veterans too.
Yeah,
that's another big point.
Another big point. When my brother came back from Vietnam and he showed me how to make improvised hand grenade. Yeah. And I told him about that later, after, like 30 years later. Yeah. I was like 11. He comes back from Vietnam. It's like big shock, my big hero guy.
Yeah.
And, and he said, this is years later, he goes, they taught me how to kill, but they didn't teach me how to stop.
What's funny is,
that's crazy.
Is I've actually heard that from many Vietnam veterans. My father was there and my uncle was there. One of my uncles was there, and not from them, but I've heard it from we were a military family, and so we always had guys over, and I've heard numerous in person, and I've heard, the guys in stories, I've heard the, TV shows, things like that, guys say that, so. Because, and I also think, too, is that was that era where they turned 17-year-old boys into, hi, you live in Fair California, now go over there and start shooting people.
Mm-hmm. In a heartbeat. It makes me think of who's that infamous lieutenant, the My Lai Massacre.
Oh, Sergeant or Captain Calley, Lieutenant Calley.
Lieutenant Calley. Yeah, I think that's the name. Yeah. Now, I had for people who aren't aware of this, look it up. I had heard, I'm not 100% sure, but there are videos out there of these veterans recounting what they actually did during the Vietnam War. Not to pick on Vietnam veterans in particular, but these videos exist. And they were talking about literally murdering an old woman in front of like the whole village and skinning her. Like you would some type of animal in front of everybody in the village kind of thing, It's if you've seen Platoon and you see where they murdered the mentally retarded kid in there, that's almost nothing compared to some of the things that they actually did do. Some of these was that a Marine unit? Was Lieutenant Calley, or was this Army?
Lieutenant Calley, I think he was Army.
Army. Either way, there are atrocities done by both. It seems they got a bit carried away with the civilian population.
Well, when you ask people to go to war, I believe that humans are not really warlike people, because you could see just in California how the natives lived here for 15,000 years, and they didn't have any wars. They kind of had a good thing set up. So if humans are left alone, without any kind of type, government, weird religion, whatever, we seem to live a trauma-free life. So trauma is something that humans, some say that they even carry it over in your DNA. Like I'm Slavic, and we're the original slaves, the Romans and all that. And my grandfather was a result of my grandmother getting raped by a Prussian soldier. So there's trauma that goes back in everybody's. You see that with Native Americans.
Well, and then
people might say like, oh well, you drive a car and do this and work a regular job, but there's is in your DNA that trauma that happened. That.
Well, and that kind of leads back to the. Or a lot of different points I was thinking about, but the point of this area being the largest slaughter of Native Americans in U.S. history is in Northern California, and it also happens to be a high percentage of the nation's serial killings, and
right in here, man.
California justice.
Actually, all of them. I always try to touch off some kind of Native American atrocity that happened in Northern California. This land of terror. Like paradise is on fire right now.
But there is no more paradise, unfortunately.
But the weird thing is that, okay, it's not really weird, but the Native Americans knew how to live in California. Yeah. You don't build like a giant city. You kind of have villages along the river. And so, naturally something like that's going to happen. But that whole area, there was like 10 years of Indian wars in Butte County in the 1860s. And, I wrote about it in Death in California. And for 10 years, there were like, natives would go steal some farmer's cattle or horse, and a rancher would shoot a bunch of natives that had nothing to do with it, or hang them. Yeah. And sometimes even, there was this one case where this guy's horses were all gone. So the first natives they saw, they hung them from this oak tree, like a bunch of them. And the next day the horses came back. They all kind of went on a hike. So, they were like, oops. But still, they would just hang any Indian. If something happened, they were like, hey, get that guy.
Well, and there was a bounty on them, too. So it became lucrative at a certain point in time.
The origins of the mass murder?
Well, at least out here, I mean, obviously mass murder's been happening, on the East Coast. There's a long history of it. In England, the Jack the Ripper types, that type of thing. The Native American in this particular area, I thought you made a good point about, as far as we know, them being mostly peaceful for a long period of time. Whereas if you compare the Native Americans in Mexico, because Mexico's part of North America, folks, down there, they had pyramids and sacrificed people and were a hell of a lot more warlike. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and there's even the Plains Indians, the
Apache.
Yeah, all those guys, they were dicks.
Sioux.
The other Indians didn't like them. The ones they had to the ones that lived in villages along rivers. Yeah. It was like the Sioux, they hated them, man. They were like, once they got horses, everything changed. Yeah. So it was already, their culture was already contaminated. And, but they were basically like bikers. So all they'd do is the young guys would get on horses, they'd go raid villages, grab a girl, grab all their stuff, their food, whatever they wanted.
Murder a few people,
torture a few, and take off to the next town. They'd go and catch their stuff. And they just went in a circle and up to the Missouri River and then around to the Rocky Mountains where Denver is in Colorado Springs. And they would winter alongside the east side of the Rockies because it wasn't that bad there. And so that's how the trouble happened, is that they came around for the winter, and there was a whole bunch of miners and pioneers. They cut down the trees and all that stuff. They were like, hey, we live here in the winter. And they were like, hey. So it was like that. Remember when the guy from Pantera got shot on stage?
I do remember
Columbus, Ohio. And I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and been to the Al Rosa Villa and stuff. And, that was like...
Was that Dimebag Darrell?
Dimebag Darrell.
The guitar player.
Yeah. And the cop came in with a shotgun and just blew the guy away. As he's holding Dimebag by the neck. He was already dead. And he's waving his gun around. So, it could just happen anywhere. It's
It can.
city. Remember the one in Texas?
I didn't know that's how Dimebag Darrell died.
Yeah, I heard he was shot on stage. I didn't know that he then went and held him, and that's I didn't know the rest of it.
He was an ex-Marine too, I think.
What, that killed him?
Yeah.
Sorry, Julio.
And there was that guy in Texas that went into that church and killed all those people. That's like almost forgotten now.
How long ago was
That
this?
was like a year ago.
Yeah, that was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
The one that wasn't the Dylan McDonald one. That wasn't.
No, it was like some little town outside of San Antonio, and a guy went in there and.
Well, when you said Texas,
He was the one. He's in that photo that I gave you.
and that's on episode 4.
Oh yeah.
There's another a major. It was an Army major that shot a bunch of guys on base a couple of years back.
Oh yeah, in Texas, in Fort Worth.
And this guy was an Army major.
You're talking about the Sutherland, Texas shooting, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So,
How many people were killed in that?
26.
26 people were killed in that.
26 people.
It was Devin Patrick Calley is the guy who was the shooter in that one.
Was he killed at the site?
No.
So he's in jail or death row? Or?
I honestly, this is like a.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to them. They did capture him somewhere else.
Yeah, same thing with that major that shot those people on base. He was captured
He
alive.
got death. He's in Leavenworth. And,
He got
yeah, they'll kill him.
He was also
Military court.
That guy was in the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah.
He was court-martialed in 2012.
So it's and then what we have the Golden State Killer as an ex-cop.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if it's like so much so the military makes people killers. Of course it does. That's their job. Yeah. But I think a lot of people join the military with expectations that aren't real. And once they get into it, they can't get out.
Right.
You're screwed. So you got to stick with it until you're out. And I think that sometimes that's enough to make some of these people, just they weren't that steady in the first place before they joined the military.
Right. And and I think too is I think the era kind of ended when I was legal age to go in the military, but everyone who was older than me, it was that old thing too. You either went to jail or you went in the military. Yeah. Or if you were a high school dropout, you went to the military.
Went to the military.
And a lot of times it was, I know my grandfather, he fought in World War II. He went in the military, my great-grandmother's side, I think he was like maybe 16.
16, yeah.
Well, that was a very patriotic thing.
And so it was like, the thing was,
at that time,
he had other brothers, so they stayed. And he went in the military, but he was the oldest. But it was one of those things where he was going to go, and he might have been a junior in high school or something.
It's young. I think with some of these other ones, and we're talking about more recent cases, I think killers are drawn to positions of authority. Just like predators are drawn to wherever their prey is. If they're pedophiles, they're going to be drawn to places that put them near children. I think, as a young man, he's like, I want to go kill somebody. How can I do that legally? I'll join the Marine Corps.
I didn't know this. My father was a navigator. He went in to be a pilot, washed out, he became a navigator, and that's what he ended up. But because it was the Army Air Force or Army Air Corps, if you washed out of like gunnery school or navigator, bombardier, if you washed out of that, you were in the Army. Mm-hmm. And you were sent, your ass was sent overseas.
You went to the front line?
Yeah, you were screwed, man. You were on island hopping in the Pacific, or you were in France and...
You ever see that Baby Blue Marine with Jan Michael Vincent? Did that stop?
No.
Oh.
No, I was pointing at the dog.
The dog or the cat?
The dog.
What dog?
She was trying to nudge her way through the gate again.
But like Kurt Vonnegut was a POW during the war. He was part of this group. They were the second batch of people, of men drafted. And they were like college students and highly educated people. And what they did is they sent them back to school. All the colleges were military now, or at least, they run back. And they finish your engineering degree, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So all these guys were like, hey, we're in the military, but, we're getting our free food now and all that. And they were like, the war's going to be over. Well, the war wasn't over. It was harder than they thought, especially after Normandy. and those guys all got called in. So those were the green guys that got called into like the Battle of the Bulge.
It's,
They just got there and you guys go in there, and like thousands of them got captured.
And a quick,
so when he wrote Slaughterhouse 5, was is that Dunkirk? What is that?
No, that's the Battle of the Bulge.
What they were prisoners of war, and then they were bombed, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, in
what was that town?
The German town.
I'm trying to
know right away. It'll come to me.
It wasn't Dunkirk. It was something
Dunkirk
else.
It was there. It's like, oh, it's the most beautiful town in the world. Dresden.
Dresden. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, Dresden. Big bombing and that thing. So,
and
They firebombed it.
And there's two. I just kind of on a quick World War II note. I work in Davis, and the other day I was walking around in one of the buildings. And I saw this picture, and it's the engineering and drafting. What would have been the engineering and drafting hall in the 1940s, when no one was going to Davis during the war. They turned that into it was the military school.
Mm-hmm.
So during World War II, Davis was a military institution.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah, it was very. I mean, it was legit. They were saying that nobody was doing drafting and this because they were all gone.
yeah. Yeah, that went in World War II. The whole country went to war. It wasn't just.
But just popped in my head. We were talking about the war, and I saw that. It just kind of.
So that reminds me of the Mad Killer and his disappearance right around the start of World War II, which goes along with my theory that killers are attracted to the military, and places where they could, do what they want to do. Timothy McVeigh, I think, had a record of cruelty towards prisoners or just shooting guys out there when he was in the Gulf War. So.
Yeah, he was like a machine gunner. And they had these, some kind of vehicle, you probably know what they is, but they had like a plow in the front, and they would just bury the front line. Mm-hmm. They'd have trenches dug, and they'd just
bury the guys
plow it
alive.
out, and he would shoot them before they did it. So he'd just be raking them with machine guns.
It was like the what is that? Not the M5 cannon.
What?
The gun he's talking about. I forgot
Oh, I'm
what they were
sure it's
called.
probably a 50. A 50 cal would be huge. You probably had a M249 SAW or an M60.
249 SAW, I think is what it was.
Yeah, 60. It might have been a 60. Who knows?
But
World War II, World War I, World War II is the same war. Pretty much up into the Cold War II. We might even still, like in 300 years, they might look back at those times that we're still at war.
Yeah.
But it was like at least we had like an enemy that was evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was like you can take a side on that. That's not that hard.
Well, that's the difference between that and Vietnam is that Vietnam, it wasn't so clear. And why were we even there? We didn't have any territory in Vietnam. It was only the French that did. And so how the hell did we end up getting involved?
I think it was Boeing and Raytheon and all those companies that got us in there. Just like the Spanish-American War, that was made up by Hearst.
Oh, yeah?
There was nothing really going on there.
Really?
I mean, we beat the Spanish. They were, that would be like us beating Ecuador right now.
That was
It's like, yeah.
That was the Grenada of its time.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
San Juan Hill.
Yeah.
That was the Rough Riders thing, right? With the made Teddy a hero.
Yeah.
He was a hero before that. He was like the police commissioner of New York City. And
Oh, really?
yeah, he was born rich. There's a picture of Lincoln's funeral procession going past his house, and he's up in a window.
As a little kid watching
Yeah,
it.
he
Wow.
grew up, Teddy Roosevelt.
I heard his son's name was Kermit.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was funny just because I grew up with Kermit the
Yeah,
Frog and
what
think
a
that
name.
that was actually his name.
So, yeah, we get these mass murderers, like, in Seattle, there was that Cafe Racer, which was just kind of like a funky restaurant. They had, music in the evenings and stuff. And this guy walked in there and shot like 5 or 6 of them. And, there was a party.
Was that this year?
That was about 5 years
5
ago
years
now.
ago, okay.
Yeah, because it's open now. And
Because wasn't there another shooting in like a mall or something this year?
well, probably. I don't know. Was it?
Or was it? Maybe
There's
was it?
so many
Or was
of
it?
them.
No. It was at the college.
Huh.
It is sad that we can't remember
Because there's been
because
so many.
there's been so many.
And it was like we had mentioned earlier before we just probably now before we even did the last 2 episodes, was that I had said in the prior podcast, which I don't even know if it's up yet or not, that, we'll probably have another shooting this week, and we did.
But, it's hard to say if this is happening now, or is it worse because the weapons are better? But then again, if you compare it to other times, because they didn't have the mass media,
Right,
like we do now, where we find out about something that happened in Maine, where 50 years ago even, that would have been like the back page of a section down the corner, man kills family.
I do. I do know that. I don't know. I know what mass shooting it would have been. Maybe around the Columbine time or something like that. I remember a radio DJ personality saying there's always been mass shootings, and that he goes, but the difference was like you said, the weapons were different, and they would.
It was a local story.
It was a local story, and the only way you heard about it would be if Aunt Rose and Uncle Bob lived in Chicago and you lived in Miami. If they came to visit or wrote you a letter, and if they did, it would be weeks later. And there was no pre-television.
Well, I still think there's got to be there has been a dramatic increase because I'll go back to the 60s.
I'm not saying they weren't having one a day. They weren't having one a day.
Well, have you heard about the guy? This is around the time, but we know about the Texas Tower shooter, right? You guys heard about that guy climbing the Texas Tower. Around that same time period, there was a guy who walked into some Texas beauty shop and ordered like 7 or 8 women who were in there, to lay on the ground face down and just executed them all. And then sat there and waited for the police to arrive and saying this was his chance to be famous kind of thing. So, like you said, mass shootings have always been there. Have there been 307 in 1 year before? I'm not sure. And the weapons, certainly have gotten better from the 60s, but, to be honest with you, the 60s we had some pretty good weapons.
Right. But I think what we're mainly talking about is let's go back to pre-World War II when everything was bolt action, not a lot of repeating. There was there was
no coast to coast radio until 1926.
Yeah, so it was it was one of those things stories. Where like you said, 1926 is when we got coast to coast radio. Before that, we had what was the wire?
The telegraph.
The telegraph. It still wasn't. It wasn't like you weren't getting one from California to New York.
Big news stories would make it, but you're right. A lot of small ones would slip through. Yeah. I still think, I could be wrong, but the first school shooting that I can recall is the one from the 70s with that little redhead girl, the one they wrote "I Don't Like Mondays" about. She lived.
Yeah, before that, kids would die in fires in their school.
Well, yeah. But it wasn't like...
Well, there's a guy in Bath, Michigan, who blew up the school.
He blew up a school.
And I grew up 100 miles from that. I did not know about that until I was about 30 years old.
What year did this happen? What decade are we talking about?
It happened in the 1920s.
Wow.
Like maybe 1922 or something.
Wow.
And there's been ones that I've read where, like in 1919, a kid... had a rifle and he shot up the school. But again, it was...
Yeah.
Well,
there was a guy in Fairfield, I think it was about 1912 or something around there. This is actually going to end up somewhere. I really don't know how to work it. But it was a guy, he was a heroin addict, and he wanted to marry this girl on the farm. They were all farm workers. Father said no. And he ended up killing like 12 people with a hatchet, and then he found a gun and shot a couple. And he killed 13 people.
Wow.
So there have been people going insane and killing other people for as long as...
Yeah.
This goes back to, this is a non-lethal story, but this is a story that's directly related to me. My grandfather, who's still alive, grew up in the Highlands in New Jersey, we call it. And he... was actually they got hazed basically by these seniors from school. They were at maybe 12, something like that, and they got hazed by these seniors on the electric rail that they used to take to school. Now the guy who ran the electric rail, the conductor or whatever, was actually kind of in on it because he didn't break it up and he was laughing and, seemed like he was in on the whole thing. So that really pissed off my grandfather. So him and his buddy actually, took their 22 rifles, and the next time, the car's going by with just him in it, they shot out all the windows in the car. And so the police were waiting for them, and it turned out to be a big deal for that little town. But because that guy had actually taken part, basically of the hazing. Well, the hazing, to get graphic, because we don't bleep curses on this thing, but hazing back in the day. This is going back to the 40s. These were like 12-year-old kids, and these seniors from high school held them down, pulled their pants down, and like lipstick to their assholes. Oh God! Now I can't think of anything more gay, or pedophilic. I mean, really, these are 12-year-old kids, and this conductor just watches it or laughs, and so they shot out the windows. But today, that story would be like headline news across the country.
Oh yeah,
for a minute. Until the next mass shooting, that's.
But they would probably be the story would be them getting assaulted.
The kids,
by the
exactly.
boys.
Yeah, you're right.
So I just looked up a quick list of mass shootings. This one, the one before, said there was a list from 49 until 2017.
Yeah.
So we got July 1984, gunman kills 21 people at a McDonald's in California.
I didn't know that one.
Before being killed by police.
It's one in Stockton, too.
Gunman kills 14 postal workers in Oklahoma before committing suicide. That's 1991. Gunman crashes pickup into a Texas cafe. Then begins shooting, kills 23.
These are all one-offs, decades apart, though. Is there any stats on the actual numbers per year?
The one that it said right here was that...
the gun violence of America.
It said that since 2011, up until 1986, it was about one every 200 days. And now it is tripled since then, so it's about the average is about one every 70 days. Which now, probably taken in this year, it'll definitely shrink that number down.
So is that just population explosion, or is there something wrong?
No, I think a lot of it too, because this happens in America, and like let's say the middle-aged man or the guy in his late 20s or something like that. Yeah. Now they've like lived their life full of bullshit, and they were like realizing the life they led is bullshit. And I think that's what is clicking off a lot of these people. It's like, I know a lot of friends of mine, I mean, not myself included, we played by the rules, did all this stuff, blah, 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 and then got screwed in the end, My father lost his pension because of Reagan, changing the rules. Well, and then they just rehired everybody back for like, $15 less, but he had already retired. But, he did everything right. He lost all that money,
Jesus.
That happens to a lot of people. Like if you lose your job in your 40s, unless you're like have some kind of real specific skill, you're fucked. You're never going to work again.
Nobody wants to hire somebody. Not when there's all this young talent out there.
I don't know.
Also, they're bullshit.
I don't know if this is...
what different companies and stuff, they might be able to trick a younger person into believing this.
Yeah.
But like people like our age, if we got hired by some guy who had something, we'd be like, that sounds like a bullshit scam to me. Yeah. We're not going to hire people like us because we don't believe them. We know.
Yeah. So just to kind of go back to our theory on mass shootings, the earliest one the documented record that I can find, run a quick Google search, would be the Markdale school shooting in Markdale, Ontario, August 25th, 1884. A 28-year-old head teacher, William Norris, wounded Fanny Ford, a teacher who had rejected his advances, with 3 shots, then fatally shot himself through the head. They're counting that as a mass shooting, I guess, but...
In Canada, it would be.
In Canada, yeah.
I think that's a crime of passion.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, you know what? This is just a Canadian
In the
list.
South, they'd call that a divorce.
Oh, yeah, right. This is actually, I didn't realize, this is a Canadian list.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but still,
they had that guy in Quebec who shot up at the college campus.
1884.
Killed like 30 women.
30, wow. Yeah. Well, that reminds me that we spoke about the yoga shooting on a previous podcast, but that guy seemed to have a hatred for women.
Yeah.
And he was, 40? Just 40. You know,
He was 40.
Yeah, so
but
I think a lot of it.
And well, I think with that guy too is I only know because I rewatched the episode on the way over here was we had done the research and he was I think it was up and starting in like 2010 when he was at FSU he would got in trouble for like touching women's asses
right.
and
He
stuff
was an ass
and
grabber.
it was multiple times.
Yeah.
It was like 6 times or something that it
got
had happened and he got caught.
I mean, he might have
or
been
that,
doing that.
or
down
that
the street all
someone
the time.
called the cops and said, "Hey, man, this guy's touching me inappropriately." But yeah, so like with that guy, you know, he was a serial toucher, basically inappropriate toucher.
And you have to think about it. It's like these guys, these shooters, none of them are really in a relationship of any kind, or even a close personal one, like one might have with a brother, or a sister, or something like that. These people seem to have no other relationships that are like really close.
Right.
That the Vegas shooter though guy, right?
He was married and all that too.
He had a girlfriend, right? Yeah, the girlfriend who he sent to the Philippines.
I
with
don't
like
know if they have a
$100,000.
brain tumor or something, but that guy had a brain tumor.
Because
I haven't read anything about it, but his action is kind of like when somebody gets brain cancer or something, they do something really out there.
Well, it brings up the point of gun control, and I know Australia when they had basically
Tasmanian guy shot up all those people they banned.
Yeah. So that was one event, and they decided to. Everybody turned in their guns pretty much for the most part. I'm sure there are some exceptions to the rule.
Well, I mean, I'm a gun owner. I'm actually a safety instructor, but big deal.
Awesome.
But and I grew up with guns and stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between when people have a catch of weapons.
Yeah.
Like you don't need 15 AR-15s. It's like my brother was a big gun collector, but he had like Russian sniper rifles and
Vintage
cowboy pistols and he had like some really fun stuff. But when somebody just has like 20 Glocks,
If I ever had a concealed weapons permit, I'd probably carry like a 38. I would carry
38
something.
Detective Special is like
Exactly.
one of the best pistols ever made.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Unless you never leave shells around anywhere, even. But I'm not saying that you're going to use it illegally. You're not littering.
yeah.
So
My parents actually had somebody break into their home. This is in New Jersey, just a few years ago, and my stepmother had gotten up and walked out of her bedroom, and there's literally a guy in the kitchen with a knife, kind of thing. Now, luckily, he just ran out the door and didn't, do anything, but it was, that's basically what drove them to then go, become gun owners. And in New Jersey, it takes like an act of God to get a gun license. I grew up in that state, and you think that these other states, it cracks me up, 5 days waiting or this that, and the other thing. It's like, try 6 months, try a year, try classes you have to go through, and then you have to have a justification and and you'll never get a concealed carry in the state of New Jersey. I mean, even business owners rarely, get them. So it's, in that way, I grew up, where it was a privilege just to be able to go to a range and shoot, and then I went to the Marine Corps where it was pretty much easy. And then you go to the South or out here, you can pretty much go anywhere to a gun range. Brings in another point. And this is going a little off topic, but it's the gun thing. Have you heard about the suicides at gun ranges?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's
So much so that
It's
there's
easy. It's an easy way to do it.
Well, there's
Somebody else can clean up the mess.
there's a rule now. If you go to any gun range, you're not allowed to go by yourself.
Really?
Like if you go as one person and just try to rent a gun,
they won't do it.
if you go with a group of people, they think, oh well, you guys are going together.
What if you bring your own gun?
That's different. If you have your own gun and you're, that's because then you could shoot yourself at home or no matter what. But they don't want to make it just easy for anybody to come off the street, decide that I'm going to rent this gun and then put it in my mouth and pull the trigger, because apparently that's happened quite a few times.
Yeah, it has. It actually just happened not too long ago here.
I'll say it happened at the one by my house, I think, was it? In
Like
Ranch
Grant Line
Cordova?
Road, that one on Grant Line?
Out in Ranch Cordova.
Oh, okay. Did it happen there, too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Well,
probably-
gun ranges give me the creeps, but I've been, there a lot, but I would much rather just be in like my brother-in-law's desert property.
Oh yeah. If you're lucky enough.
Flower,
to have that.
Yeah.
That's how I grew up with it. You know, you just walk 2 blocks, you're out in the field and
Being out-
get cans and stuff.
Be out at the Broken Skull Ranch up in northern Nevada.
Yeah.
Hang out there with Steve Austin and shoot guns off his back porch.
Yeah, it's that's the privilege of having that much property and being that rural. The bad part is that you got to drive an hour to go shopping anywhere. Or,
Right.
Yeah, our fire might come and destroy everything.
yeah. Or did you hear about that couple that just got married on some remote ranch and they helicoptered out of there
Helicopter.
and smashed? It's just like happy honeymoon.
Right. That's
I think maybe just take the Jeep.
Man,
yeah.
Yeah.
that's kind of like
That's the what's it called? The eccentricity. What's it called?
Kismet.
Yeah, doing too much. Like
Yeah.
everybody wants to have this big giant
know.
wedding, this and that. And look, I feel awful for the people and their family,
Yeah.
their families that now no longer have them.
But you should have got a limo. Or don't have the wedding in some remote middle of the property, 80,000 acres from anywhere.
You know, or
Try
it could have
Hawaii.
been some kind of time travel thing where that couple were going to produce like a guy worse than Hitler or something. and
So
they-
somebody came back and took him out.
time
Yeah.
traveler.
That's possible.
What was that? Looper.
Looper.
Is that what it was?
yeah, the
Yeah.
Looper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been on a helicopter twice, and I don't, maybe 3 times. I wouldn't do. I've never been on one at night. Do you know what I mean? It's to me that's like a whole nother added level of risk. Like wait, I mean, like the whole JFK Jr. thing, and I don't know whether this is real or not, but they said like he didn't have his license to fly at night. So apparently you can get a license to fly during the day, but not at night. So that must be a whole nother
But
level
you
of
have to be
complication.
you have to be certified to fly.
I think to fly at night, you have to. Yeah, you have to. It's almost like, almost like having a gun permit or you to fly at night. Because I think that's the thing too with John Denver.
Yeah.
yeah,
He was like even though he crashed during it was like in the morning, he wasn't supposed to be able to fly until like 10 in the morning, and he crashed at like 6 in the
well,
morning.
he didn't even have a license. His license was expired.
Was it?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. See, but I'm saying though that if he had one, he wasn't flying in the allotted times he was supposed to be flying.
Yeah. Flying's complicated. That's why you don't see flying cars now. Everybody thought back, in the future we'll have flying cars. You know how we do. They're called helicopters, and they're complicated as shit. And
Well, we've talked about this before. Is that my father being who my father was, I got to go do a lot of the cool stuff with guys who were active helicopter pilots in the Air Force.
Yeah, cool.
And stuff like that. So I've been on quite a few flights where they were like, it's at night, let's take the helicopter out, no one will know, or you're with the guy who's your boss and they're fucking around.
you see, that's like when good times go bad. It seems like a recipe for
Know when to step away.
Yeah.
But one of the guys that was one of the original pilots was stationed at Mather.
Yeah.
And when they flew into Mather one time under the cover of dark and all that stuff, my dad literally wakes me up and goes, "Come on, goes, put your gear on, we're going." And I, get dressed and we'll go to the base. And I literally walked within 100 feet of that thing before I even saw it. And I was like, oh shit. Like, and I was young.
Yeah.
And then I remember in my head, I just cussed in front of my dad, And it was like, that's the SR-71, like.
Yeah. The coolest plane ever
the
built.
like greatest plane ever invented. And my dad would be like, "You gonna come over and have dinner?" I'm like, "It's like 3 in the morning." But my dad, the guy hung out. My dad's like, "All right, go back to bed now."
That's cool.
That's it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But it was just one of those things where, those cool planes, they could do some cool shit. You ever seen that plane turn
No.
in flight?
Well, I've seen it. Like I said, I saw it do straight up and then just do like.
They, most planes have got to take the big wide.
Yeah.
They almost could, they would be in there and they would almost turn like that. Wow. I mean, not
just kind of spin it.
It was
around.
almost like they
X-
hit the brakes and could hit it.
The new X Fighters did that shit. I was out by your house in somebody's backyard for an air show when they were just showing the new X Fighters, and the damn thing did that just over the house. and it looked like a spaceship moving. It didn't look like. And I thought, can you imagine being some dude out in the desert somewhere, and, and living in a hut and seeing some shit like that?
Well, I mean, that's why everyone in Area 51 always for years thought they were spaceships. I mean, and the military's just now coming out going, oh no, those were just SR-71 tests. Like,
All right, so getting back onto the mass shooter thing.
Like we said before, folks, we talk about a lot of shit on this podcast.
We go all over the place with this one. Funny how one conversation always leads into another topic of conversation. But obviously we're not going to come to any clear answers or great hypothesis here. I think anybody can pretty much tell that there seems to be an increase. Not sure why. I'd watched a couple documentaries about that. There's also an increase with middle-aged white males, particularly without college degrees, that are killing themselves, mostly in the Midwest. And you were saying, after 40, if you lose your job, it's damn near impossible to ever find another job.
Yeah. And those jobs in those factories aren't there anymore. Either they've been automated.
Yeah.
But, my father was a tool and die maker, and the tool and die makers are still doing okay, but, there's, it's not like, I grew up near all the GM factories in Michigan.
Oh, God.
And I was told that in the 60s, up until the late 60s, you could just walk in there, and by the time you got home, they had called and asked you to come in to get your physical.
That's how many people they needed.
People would work at Buick in Flint, and if they didn't like their job, they'd walk across the street to AC battery or AC spark plugs, get hired just like that. And like, especially where I lived in Michigan, that was like the most booming economy in the history of the world. Yeah. If your father, usually it was a father, worked at GM, you had a cottage up north, you had a couple of cars, you had a snow machine, you turned 16, you got a used car.
Living the dream.
The
American dream.
My cousin, I have tons of family members who work there. Uncles and...
Seems that entire city, Motor City, was built, on the automobile, and since the decline of manufacturing in America, you can see that the turn it's taken.
Well, yeah, it was. There's easy access to iron ore from up north in northern Michigan and Minnesota and Canada, and access to water, access to transportation. The infrastructure is all there. It's still all there.
Yeah.
That's probably where they'll build the Starship Enterprise or something.
It does
enough room to build it there.
Didn't it get a start because that was Ford's area, where he grew up? Didn't he grow up in Michigan? Isn't like Fair Lane and all that. Yeah. So
plus, Studebaker was there, Packard was there.
Yeah, but I mean,
Chevy. It's just for some. Well, that's a whole story. Detroit, was founded by Cadillac in 1730 or something. It was,
really?
Yeah, it was a French. First 150 years, everyone spoke French in Detroit.
So it went from logging.
I drew tickets to Detroit once when I lived in Holland, and the ticket lady called it Detroit. Oh, you're going to Detroit?
That's funny.
It's like Detroit.
I know wasn't Gibson made in Michigan for a long time?
Kalamazoo,
yeah, and so was Harmony. Harmony guitars were made.
And Epiphones.
And Epiphones. So I could understand that because of the wood, I guess. You guys, it's a lumber area. You got massive amounts, plus the Great Lakes there.
Well, a lot of people live in Michigan.
Yeah.
It's still like the 10th most populated.
I understand, but it makes me wonder why why did that become such a boom for such a town for automobiles and for, instruments and things like that, whereas on the East Coast, I guess with Edison, you had that bit of manufacturing come up, and then you had textiles, a lot of textiles, and iron towns, steel towns, but it makes me wonder how Michigan, how Detroit became what it was. I guess
I don't know, but I know a couple of writers that could tell you all about it. Yeah, I could get you in touch with them.
But so
a Detroit story.
Yeah,
we're a new podcast.
Off onto another one. So
Detroit's, man, it's an enigma.
Yeah,
you could buy a house there for like $500.
Are there a high concentration of like these? I wouldn't say serial killings because we were just talking about mass shootings, but mass shootings seem to be all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't seem to see a concentration in one area of the country.
there isn't.
We just had one in Florida. We just had one in Pennsylvania. We just had one here in
the city, it
California.
can happen in the country.
Like you get that remote town, 26 people inside of a church in a fairly small town.
Yeah.
That took out a good portion of the town's population, I bet. And, I guess the answer isn't taking away guns because we still need them for self-defense. Like I was saying, my parents got broken into with the nutcase, and certainly in that type of situation, I would want them. But at the same time, you can't really argue with numbers. It does seem to be...
I think there's maybe there's too many guns out there. Like I get kicked off Facebook for saying stuff like, buy guns, or buy guitars, not guns.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a plaything. And like my brother, he got all carried up into it. I mean, he was a lifelong gun guy.
Yeah.
But, when he died, his wife got stuck with like 300 guns that, one would be worth $3,000 and one would be worth $150.
Yeah.
And she didn't know. He had Lugers and,
And so she's stuck having to auction off this stuff or take it to pawn.
Yeah, my
pawn
nephew
stars.
helped her with it, but still, it's like, he had a collection and stuff, but I think that I think the AR-15, AK-47, those are like murder guns. Those are guns for military, and I think to get those off the street, we should just offer everybody $5,000 for one you bring in. Put it in a metal cutter right there, man. Just blam.
Stop selling them.
Yeah, and just give everybody, here's, that's like 3 times more than it's worth.
Yeah.
And who would be like, oh shit, man, I got like 4 of them sitting around, fuck that.
I think
I get 20 grand, I could
even, and I've heard a lot of people argue, it's like, oh, you could hunt with those weapons. I'm just like, well, you better with a 30-30 or...
You could hunt with a 257 long-range sniper rifle.
Yeah,
That's
it doesn't matter.
basically a hunting weapon anyways.
Now here's the thing is, how useless is a bump stock for hunting?
Oh, I would think it'd be pretty, unless you're hunting wild boar,
Maybe.
you just want to take out an entire group,
Yeah.
I just think...
That's where they would come in handy, but...
Yeah, but, so, I mean, automatic weapons are illegal, but a bump stock makes a weapon automatic. And I know the technicalities, not technically automatic. I've shot, and let me tell you something. In the Marine Corps, we didn't have automatic weapons. We had 3-round burst. That was it. And a bump stock is a hell of a lot more than 3-round burst. So now you have weapons that exceed military standards in the civilian population. And the only people who seem to want them are gun nuts. I got to call you guys that. I mean, I'm a guitar nut. I've got too many of them hanging on my wall. You guys, if you own more than 5 guns, and I'm being generous with that, you're a gun nut probably. And then the guys...
Well, they're all the same gun. If you got 5 AR-15s, then you're a gun
then you're
nut.
a militia. You know, if
But,
I would think, you got 5 shotguns.
I could
Okay, yeah.
if they're antiques,
There's a lot of
if you're a
times
collector,
it's like, I argue your uncle died, and here, man, there's a shotgun. Well, you're not gonna. What are you gonna? You get $100 for it if you sold it anyway.
Exactly.
So.
No, I can see that.
And,
But
sometimes they'll be carved.
I think I was being generous with 5.
Yeah. That is, Phil, that is just about an hour for both.
For both?
Yeah.
We're going to have to say goodbye for today.
I'm Alexis Derevko.
And I'm Phil DeSaro.
David Kulczyk.
And come back and see us next time.
Remember, follow us on Twitter. And Twitter is Cities Blood. Instagram is Cities of Blood.
Look us up on YouTube, and or if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. And if you like it, give us a like.
And click the bell so you get the notifications. And then Cities of Blood on Facebook.
Amazon. On Amazon.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Buy his books.
Yeah, these are great books. If you're into this stuff, which if you're watching this podcast, you should be into it. So make sure you have a copy. So we will see you next time.
Thank you.